Ahmad Hakmabadi Tabrizi, known as Ahmad Kasravi, was born on September 29, 1890 in Akhmver, a poor rural quarter in the suburbs of Tabriz, to G. Mir Qasim, a small merchant in a religious family. He entered a traditional school at the age of 6 in the expectation that he would become a mullah to carry on his paternal ancestor's role of religious leader. Although the school's semi-literate mullah could not educate the intelligent and curious young boy, Kasravi successfully completed the traditional program in the course of 4 years with the help of his father and other relatives at home. At the age of 11, he lost his father. At 13, responsible for his family's future, he took charge of his father's carpet weaving business, a job that ended after 8 months upon the permanent closing of the business. He then took over the management of the carpet weaving business of a close friend of his father. About 3 years later, at the urging of his family, he left that trade to resume his theological studies. In a short time he mastered Arabic grammar and then enrolled in the Labia school, the biggest school in Tabriz. In 1906 the constitutional revolution broke out in Iran, of which Tabriz became a principal home. Kasravi had just turned 16. He subscribed to the seminal ideas of the movement, such as the establishment of a constitutional government and the founding of a national assembly, Majlis-e Shura-i A bloody war broke out between the adherents and the detractors of the movement, turning the town into a battlefield. Most of the men of the Kasravi family were opposed to the movement, which forced him to go into seclusion and devote his time to reading all the books he could find. As a result of the defeat of the opponents of the movement and the dismissal of Mohammad Ali Shah Qajar, the town recovered its composure, and Kasravi resumed his theological studies. After 2 years of study, he became eligible for the rank of mullah. His family wanted it, but Kasravi hated this job and preferred to find work in the bazaar of Tabriz. In the end he gave in to his family's wishes, but he decided not to act like an ordinary mullah. He refrained from reciting tales of martyrs and criticized from the lofty pulpit the false claims of the mullahs about the martyrs. This lasted a year and a half, and throughout that time he tried to free himself of the burden of an occupation he found so disagreeable. Nonetheless, he memorized the Quran and meditated on the meaning of its verses. Thus, doubt began to gnaw at his mind. In 1911, Mohammad Ali Shah, the deposed and banished king, secretly returned to Iran and, rallying his supporters, attempted to overthrow the constitutional government. A new war broke out between the adherents and the detractors of the movement. The town of Tabriz found itself surrounded by the forces favoring the deposed king. The appearance of Halley's comet in the sky over the town at the moment when savage combat was taking place, terrified the population, most of whom took this coincidence as a sign of the imminent end of the world. On several nights Kasravi climbed to the roof of his house and observed the comet in an attempt to discover some facts on this matter. Eventually he came across an article in Arabic in a special number of the Egyptian monthly Al-Muqtataf. On the one hand, he was astonished that so sumptuous a magazine was published in Egypt, and on the other, he realized that European astronomy had nothing in common with what was known by that name in Iran. This incident led him to become involved with modern science. He acquired physics, chemistry, mathematics, and geography books and began to read. In late December 1911, a merciless war pitted the constitutionalist combatants of Tabriz against Russian soldiers sent by the Tsarist government to snuff out their movement and restore the deposed king to the throne. The fervor aroused in Kasravi by the heroic resistance of the fighters led him to take to the pulpit in mosques throughout the town to call the population to rise up. But after 4 days of relentless combat, the war ended with the rout of the defenders and the execution of the most ardent. Kasravi spent his time studying mathematics and astronomy. He would also occasionally visit the main bazaar in town to pass some hours at the business offices of his circle, where he met educated men, all of them partisans of liberty, some of whom spoke European languages. It was they who taught him the real meaning of the word mashru, constitutional government, of which he would remain for the rest of his life a staunch defender. At the same time he was pursuing his study of Arabic, so successfully that after a while he began to write articles in that language and send them to the scientific journal Al-Irfan published in Sidon, Lebanon, which welcomed them. The outbreak of World War I in summer 1914 engendered great hopes among the constitutionalists. The Russians increased their numbers in Azerbaijan, and the Ottoman troops, fighting the Russian army, approached Tabriz. The constitutionalists seized the opportunity to join forces with them, but the Ottomans immediately suffered defeat and fell back. In 1915, Kasravi was 25. After several years of attempting to penetrate modern science, he realized that he needed to learn a European language. He first studied French and acquired a degree of familiarity, and then he enrolled in English classes at the Memorial School, an American school in Tabriz, where at the same time he was asked to teach Arabic, for which he wrote an elementary textbook. Meanwhile, he learned Esperanto, from which he began to translate articles into Arabic for publication in Al-Irfan. At the end of the academic year, Kasravi was again unemployed, and since he could not find work in Tabriz, he decided to go to the Caucasus to look for a job in one of the prosperous towns of the region. He settled in Tbilisi, where he set about learning Russian and striking up friendships with many supporters of liberty. His job search did not succeed. In late September he returned to Tabriz. The Russian Revolution of February 1917 stirred great excitement throughout Iran and especially in Azerbaijan. The Russian soldiers in Azerbaijan switched sides and after 6 years of occupation and terror displayed a change of heart toward the local fighters. Meanwhile, conflicts between the various religious sections took on a political aspect. After the October Revolution and the departure of the Russians, Sheikh Mohammad Ibni, a member of the old Democratic Party that had been dissolved in 1912, rebuilt the party in Azerbaijan, but dissent broke out immediately at its heart. Kasravi intervened, and the Democrats, whom Kasravi joined, ended up uniting under the authority of Ibni, but shortly after, the arbitrary decisions of its head led him to openly criticize the leadership of the party, which resulted in a movement of dissent. On April 8, 1920, after a successful uprising, Ibni seized all the levers of power in the town. In order not to impede the performance of the new provincial government and to avoid all confrontation, Kasravi and his companions dissolved their group by sending out a press release. But they were not successful. Kasravi had to secretly leave Tabriz and take shelter for a week in a nearby village. After his return to Tabriz, he was contacted and encouraged by a representative of the central government and the British charge d'affaires to challenge the power of Ibni, but he refused to take part in any rebellion against him. Even though he was innocent, he was suspected by Ibni of participating in a conspiracy and found himself forced to leave the town for Tehran in the wake of the revelation of a plot incited by the central power against Ibni with the involvement of some of his companions. In Tehran, Kasravi was hired by the Minister of Education to teach Arabic at the Irvat High School. He stayed away from all unrest among Azerbaijani exiles against Ibni. The failure of negotiations of governor-designate of Azerbaijan, with Ibni resulted on September 8, 1920 in attacks by Cossacks on the headquarters of the Democratic Party of Azerbaijan and the homes of its leaders in Tabriz. On September 21, 1920, Ibni died during a fight against his attackers. During his stay in Tehran, which lasted only 5 months, the Justice Administration offered him several positions in various towns, which he refused. In the end he accepted the position of judge in the Tabriz Appellate Court, but 3 weeks later, on February 21, 1921, a coup by the Cossack division under the command of Colonel Reza Khan put an end to it. Power fell into the hands of Syed Ia with Makran al-Din Ababai, who ordered the suspension of the activities of the Justice Administration. Kasravi was out of work. In August 1921, he lost his wife. Deeply affected, he entrusted his 2 young daughters to his brother and once again set out on the road to Tehran. After a month of negotiation with the Justice Administration, he accepted appointment as a judge on the Court of Appeals of Mazandaran, the Caspian province. After 4 days of travel by horse and mule, he reached Sari, capital of the province, where he stayed for only 4 months, thanks to the closing of his Court of Appeals by order of the Minister of Justice, Abdalhossein Tamirtash. When he got back to Tehran, in April 1921, he met with him and was promised a good job. But 2 days later, the government of Syed Ayatollah collapsed, and Tamirtash lost his portfolio. Nonetheless, shortly afterward Kasravi was given a judicial assignment in Damavand, a town northeast of Tehran, where he spent the 3 summer months, an opportunity he took advantage of to write in Arabic the history of the constitutional movement for the monthly Al-Irfan. At the end of summer 1923, he took a few weeks of vacation to visit his family in Tehran. He had remarried during his stay in Mazandaran. Then justice appointed him examiner of the competence of judges in Qazvin and Zanjan. Shortly afterward, in December 1923, Ahmad Shah, who was preparing to leave for Europe, named Reza Khan Sardar Sipa, the powerful war minister, as prime minister. The judicial authority of the new government summoned Kasravi to Tehran to send him to Shushtar as head of the Tribunal of Khuzestan. While he was there, he undertook research into the dialects of Khuzestan, just as he had done in Mazandaran. His research on Iranian dialects would harmonize later with the movement for purification of the Persian language, which would be launched with the support of the political authorities, in order to render Persian more vigorous and better able to respond to the needs of modern times. Kasravi also threw himself into the study of the history of Khuzestan and undertook research on ancient sites such as Susa, Janishapur, and Awaz. He would later publish the results of these investigations in a book called 5 Centuries of the History of Khuzestan, Tri-e Natsli-e Yuzestan. The first book he published after his return to Tehran was called Ari, Historical Survey of the Ancient Language of Azerbaijan. This book enjoyed worldwide scholarly success. A few months later, Kasravi was named public prosecutor of Tehran. He carried out an educational mission in Khorasan and, on the insistence of Davar, the Minister of Justice, replaced his turban with a hat. But because of his inflexibility in the application of the law, he fell into open conflict with his supervising minister and found himself obligated to resign from the Justice Ministry. After his resignation, for a little over a year he practiced law, and then returned to the Ministry of Justice and took a job in the Court of Assizes in Tehran. Next, on the insistence of the Minister of Justice, he became president of the Tribunal de Premier Instance, a position he held for 18 months. In his own estimation, it was the most meritorious period of his life. While he held this position, he fought every breach of the principles of deontology within the Justice Ministry. During that time he wrote a book called The Law of Justice, in which he condemned the inconsistencies in the ministry's laws and the strictness of its procedures. In 1929, he was appointed to the Department of the Inspector General, newly created by the Minister of Justice, to scrutinize the tribunals of various departments. He went with a group of inspectors to Hamadan and Iraq. At the end of 1929, his position within the Justice Ministry became more and more tenuous. His courageous behavior aroused both jealousy and hostility among high-ranking members of the ministry. Also, his own personality traits contributed to making the situation worse. Although Kasravi enjoyed the patronage of Abdalhossein Tamirtash, the powerful minister of court, who even supported him in his ruling against the royal court over the dispute on Evan farmlands, and Ali Akbar Davar, the reforming minister of justice, frequently overlooked his innate righteousness and intransigence, Kasravi found himself alienated at the ministry and resigned. Beginning in 1933, when he founded the magazine Payman, a new period of his life commenced. While he continued to pursue his studies in history and linguistics, he entered the lists as a reformer or, as he put it, as a destroyer of illusions. That was the period when the enforced modernization of the country was in full swing. Aware of the limitations imposed on him by the Board of Censors, he began to work out his ideas in certain very specific domains. His History of the Constitutional Movement was published in Persian for the first time starting in 1934 as a supplement to this magazine. One of the most burning questions he addressed at this point concerned cultural relations between Iran and the West. It was a time when the passion for Europe among Iranians who favored modernism was at its peak. Kasravi reacted against this passion, which he dubbed Europeanism, by writing a book called Ayin, The Way, in which he questioned the idea of progress by wondering about the consequences of technological innovations for human life. The language used by Kasravi at this time in his articles explicitly violates the usual norms of the Persian language, both syntactically and lexically. In 1934, while Kasravi was teaching Iranian history as an adjunct professor at both the Faculty of Theology and the Military Academy in Tehran, the National Assembly ratified the law of appointment and tenure of professors. Even though he met all the requirements, the university administration subjected his nomination to the condition that he retract his outrageous proposals concerning poetry and the craft of the poet that he had published in his magazine. But Kasravi did not submit. Yet his name appears among the professors of history at the Faculty of Letters of the University of Tehran. The outbreak of World War II and the ambiguity of the position of Iran vis-a-vis the belligerents led on September 16, 1941 to the abdication of Reza Shah in favor of his son. One of the consequences of his departure and the Allied occupation of the country was the emergence of several political parties. Kasravi seized the opportunity to propagate his ideas freely, and to this end he immediately founded an organization called Society of Free Men. A politico-cultural movement grew up around the platform of his organization and from time to time carried out despicable acts such as the annual burnings of books that Kasravi considered deleterious to the education of youth. Collections of poems by the great Persian poets, including Jalal al-Din Rumi, Hafez, Khayyam, and Saadi, were also cast into the flames during a symbolic ceremony performed on the 22nd of December every year. For according to Kasravi, classical Persian poetry had no other message to convey than Sufism, against which at the moment he was conducting a ruthless war. The occupation of the country by foreign troops, which lasted until the end of the war, created a condition of disorder and fostered intense political rivalry within the assembly and in the press. Taking advantage of the presence of the Red Army in Azerbaijan, Syed Jafar Pishavari, a veteran Azerbaijani communist, seized the opportunity to found the Democratic Party of Azerbaijan and in November 1945 proclaimed the autonomy of Azerbaijan. Supported by the Soviets, the party constituted a local authority to which the Iranian army units stationed in Azerbaijan submitted. Another separatist government, a Kurdish one supported by the Democratic Party of Azerbaijan and the Soviets, was formed at Mahabad. For their part, the English, in collaboration with the nomadic tribal chiefs of the south and southwest, were getting ready to impose their empire in the southern provinces and Khuzestan. The dismemberment of the country appeared to be a fait accompli. This was the milieu in which Kasravi composed an essay with a political tinge called, "What Will the Future of Iran Be?", in which he analyzes the country's perilous situation, delivers an intelligent critique of the political platforms of the parties, and lastly takes on the undignified behavior of both the majority and minority deputies in the National Assembly, who at the time were ripping into each other with abuse and slander. He lists the dangers that were threatening the territorial integrity of the country and reveals the flaws of the political plans of the parties and the incoherence of the ideologies that controlled their minds. Faithful to his principles, to the end of his life Kasravi remained an unremitting defender of order, national unity, justice, the constitution, and the modernization of the country. He staunchly opposed everything he considered an obstacle to realizing these ideals. Thus it was that he ventured onto a dangerous path that all the secular intellectuals of his period attempted to bypass. The defiance he would hurl at Shi'ism was unforgivable, not only for the clergy and religious fanatics, but also for the high officials of the country. With the publication of his book, Shi'ism, in late 1943, he signed his own death warrant. Shortly after its publication, he wrote another book, on Bahá'ísm. In these two books he harshly criticized the beliefs of Shi'ism and Bahá'ísm. As soon as Kasravi's book appeared, It aroused a severe reaction on the part of the fundamentalist Muslims and led to his assassination by a band of devotees of Islam on March 11, 1946. We hope you have enjoyed watching this video.